Welcome to Founders Unplugged, hosted by Greg McCallum. Long-form, honest conversations with founders and entrepreneurs from around the world.
This episode is sponsored by Founder Catalyst. Get 10% off their one-off fee by using the link in the description. More on them later. For now, enjoy the show.
I'm Phil McSweeney, and I have been in and around the startup world for 15, 16 years in various guises. I became an angel investor. Well, I trained as an executive coach after a long period in the NHS, got made redundant, and then discovered angel investing, started angel investing. Then I realized that there were lots of people, trying to start businesses that might benefit from coaching, advising, mentoring, and so on. And I got into it in various ways through investing and through working to support founders, to grow, scale businesses and so on. And in short, that's what I've been doing for about 15 years. I never went back to, working in a kind of big corporate organization where progress is generally very slow. And along the way, I wrote a book called AngelThink about 4 years ago now. Published about 2 years ago. It was my lockdown hobby, I guess.
Right.
My lockdown activity. Here I am trying to do a couple of things in the world, I guess. My mission is to help more founders raise funds to start their business, but particularly work with those founders that want to be exceptional. Because there are, I guess, too many that fail for a whole variety of reasons. But there are some really exciting people with some really exciting ideas that I love working with.
Yeah, good. Important observation. And I suppose also the right stuff as well, right? There's kind of a je ne sais quoi, isn't there, that you often see in founders, that is a type of drive that you often don't see in others as well, right? There's a special formula there. Yeah. So that was going to be my first question to you, but you kind of started answering it there, which is, what is it that motivates you to do what you do? So is it primarily just that those founders, those diamonds in the rough are the ones that you are seeking out to bring to the world so that their innovation isn't robbed from the world? Is that the kind of thing? Is it slightly altruistic in that sense, or is it,
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I mean, I think there's a slightly selfish reason. I don't want to be bored. I want to be intellectually stimulated and find interesting things to do. I'm not ready to sit in the garden in a deck chair, certainly not this summer anyway. So, what keeps my mind active is working with other people that have, got really active minds, really, really curious, really creative, and help them, I suppose, develop the kinds of qualities and attributes that they will need to succeed, as a founder, whether it's self-belief, courage, grit. Then you can start listing out all these kind of attributes, I think, that people are going to require.
Yeah, that resonates. And you've held a number and still do hold a number of non-executive NED roles and some board advisory roles. So explain, for those that don't know what those roles are, would you be able to kind of explain what they kind of entail and how does that sort of tie into everything that you do?
The largest one I hold is I'm a chairman of a company that develops electronic medical records.
Right. And
I've been with the company 11 years. I started off as a NED. And then 4.5 years ago, I think I kind of stepped up to being chair. The company's done pretty well in that it's raised 4 times. It 10x'd its valuation from from its first raise. And it's got a number of clients. One or two are international as well as the UK. And then alongside that, I'm an advisor and sometimes a NED for about half a dozen other companies. I don't particularly want to be a NED because it brings a Ned in the sense of listed on Companies House, as a director, because it brings kind of legal responsibilities that advisors don't necessarily need to carry. Because, if you're a founder and I suggest something to you as advice, it's kind of down to you to decide whether to follow it or not. So
Right.
I don't necessarily need to be held legally accountable for the advice I give you, because it's
And you can
your
usually
choice.
cover that with insurance as well, right?
Yeah. So, and then I kind of marry those two things together sometimes. Sometimes I will invest in a company and look for a role with the company as an advisor, because I, really favor what they're doing and the team guys, gals, that I'm working with. Or sometimes I just advise, I don't invest. And
Fair enough. And for those that don't know what an NED role is versus, no, could you explain in a little bit more detail? Because I know we have a very broad audience on this show within the startup ecosystem, but it is, I think, predominantly, probably safe to say, very early stage, maybe first time founders and so on. So if you could explain what's entailed in that, I think that'd be quite an interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's an executive role that doesn't have the day-to-day decision-making powers that executives do. And the kinds of things that you might focus on are working with founders to be clear about what their strategy is, what their growth plans are, what their kind of the things they need to measure, the metrics and so on. That they're staying within the law. There's a kind of governance dimension about, doing what's legally acceptable and morally acceptable and so on. You're there to protect other shareholders' interests, so that the founders don't run off and do something, that's not in shareholders' best interests. And I think because it's an early stage company, pre-seed, seed, Series A, then the main focus is on growth, discussing ideas and strategy plans and executing on those to deliver growth, because, that's what the company needs. You've got to get to product market fit. You said at the beginning, when you raised a certain amount of money, that this is what you do with it. You showed your deck with your hockey stick projections in it, and investors expect you to deliver on it. So, do you want
a certain amount of accountability then, in essence?
Yeah, it's a kind of accountability partnership, if you like, or co-accountability, because, sometimes you commit to doing some things yourself as well as, making introductions to people, for example.
Right. And out of all of these things that you do or dabble with and so on, what would you say are the ones that the thing that you enjoy doing the most out of, investing, advising, sitting on the board? Is there any particular that really gets you going, or is it different days, different appeals?
I suppose two things. I enjoy meeting interesting people with great ideas, and seeing whether we can do something with them. And then in my kind of more introvert moments, I like to just sit and write.
Okay.
And, I write quite a lot. I post quite a lot, and I kind of challenge, the status quo out there. That I challenge the existence of the circus, for example.
Yeah, which is one of the reasons why I think you and I, it clicked a little bit when we first spoke, and why we needed to talk, because of we share quite a similar viewpoint there. And yeah, I noticed you mostly because of your activity on LinkedIn. You're quite prolific on LinkedIn. So are you sort of also suggesting that you're writing another book? Because I'm going to ask you more about the book in a moment.
I'm toying with the idea.
Okay.
I suppose I've spent the last few months, if you like, nailing down why, or nailing down what an interesting book would be. What, if you like, what's needed in the market. And I think I've got something. And then this last week or so, I've tried to rough out a structure for it. that, the usual kind of format, I suppose, 12, 14 chapters or so, introduction, conclusion, how it's helpful to who. So this will be a book or a project, that will enhance the chances of founders getting funded and becoming the exceptional person or people that they need to be to enhance the chances of them getting funded.
Okay, very interesting. So,
Hi, a friendly reminder to share this episode with your network, like, and subscribe. And if you are feeling really supportive, please consider reviewing the show on the podcast platform of your choice. It all really helps support what we do. Thank you. Now back to the show.
your first book, tell us more about that. That's, I've seen you, I mean, I suppose a little less so these days, but especially, but definitely before, talk about it a lot on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And like you said, you wrote it during lockdown, which is a good thing, I think, because a lot of people didn't have that kind of stimulation during lockdown.
No.
So yeah, tell us more about that. What's the book kind of really covering? And well, I mean, like, really, this is an opportunity for you to promote it. Why should people buy it?
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
why
let me
not?
flash it on the screen.
Let's plug it. There you go. Yeah, excellent.
Nice little, trigger for people to know what they're looking for. So it's called AngelThink. It's available on Amazon. You can buy a paperback, or you can buy an ebook or a Kindle version. But essentially, it talks about the importance. Well, it talks about if you want to get funded, then it really helps to know what angels think, or how angels think, because they're the ones that are going to give you the money to begin with. After you've kind of drained your friends and family's bank accounts, then you want some serious money, and then so you need to talk to angels. And you don't need to talk to VCs at the beginning, because they're just not interested in you right at the beginning. You've got to prove something to get serious VC interest. So you need to know how angels think, what makes them tick, what they're likely to be looking for. And you need to know how to approach them, how to work with them, and so on. So I have a bit of an anathema about cold outreach, to people, because, in most cases it doesn't work. And even if you do try to do it, then people do it very badly and don't actually, press a button, for an angel to get interested. But the more important thing is that you need to, begin with, find some way of getting some warm outreach, if you like, some introductions, some networking, work out who might be interested in the kind of thing that you're doing, some basic rapport building skills, some relationship building skills, to understand that people, by and large, don't give money to complete strangers that they don't know. And that you need to work out what your competitive advantage is, to understand that you're in a competition, that it is a marathon, that, in the same competition as you. I kind of imagine this startup of the London Marathon. There are 40,000 people, 60,000 people, I think, in the last one, line up to begin this race. And a handful of people out of that lineup are going to get invested. The rest might finish, but, finishing in 3.5 hours is not going to get you funded. Your investors are looking for the people that are going to finish in 2 hours and 10 minutes, say. So there's that kind of analogy. So in a sense, it's that thesis, I suppose. And then, from having worked with hundreds of founders, with their various stages of their investment journey, particularly pitching and pitch decks, some insights that I can share with people about how to get that bit better, that bit better, that bit better. And I'm influenced by David Brailsford. Does the name ring a bell?
It does ring a bell. Yeah, I'm not sure why.
Cycling team, the British cycling team coach, that talks about marginal gains. If you can make all sorts of things 1% better, then the overall impact is
Yeah, that must be where I know him from. I know that quote quite well, so that must be why. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a collection of ideas about influencing skills that I've brought together into a book with a few quotes from, notable public famous people, the celebrity entrepreneurs and Warren Buffett and, a few others that might help as, triggers to help people think.
Yeah, and you mentioned something very interesting there as well about cold outreach. Like this is I mean, so my background is in sales and marketing, but primarily in sales. And cold outreach has, I think, long been a thing that's been very, very misunderstood. And like you said, either people don't do it very well, or it just doesn't have the impact that people want. What do you think people are doing wrong when it comes to cold outreach? Because a lot of people are using that as their main tactic, right?
Yes.
So what could people maybe do better there, do you think?
I often get, and this is a virtue of having, in my LinkedIn profile, I have in the headline, I have the words tech angel. So the fact that people read angel in my LinkedIn profile means that people will send me pitch decks.
Of course. Yeah.
There, more often than not, is no attempt to personalize that approach or even acknowledge that I've put tech angel. They've used some bot, some system to pick out all the angels on LinkedIn, and then some automated process to send them a non-personalized message with a pitch deck. So I'll get something that says, "Dear Phil, I see that you're an angel. I wonder if you'd be interested in investing in my ice cream parlor business." And I'm thinking, well, I'm sure I said tech angel in my
where's the tech
profile?
Yeah,
there might be some.
It could be a very high tech ice cream parlor.
There might be some technology that I don't know about making ice cream for the masses or something. So I mean, it's just the failure to personalize it or to make any attempt to personalize it, and assuming, I mean, don't get me wrong, angels or investors are looking for deal flow. So I'm not saying they don't want to receive pitch decks from people or approaches from people, but it would be nice to be warmed up a bit. It's a bit like going on a dating website and sort of picking out, an attractive looking potential partner and saying, "Dear Mary, I wondered if you'd be interested in a marriage proposal." And it's just...
Yeah, there's a lack of authenticity there, which is automatically a red flag. But then, just it feels like it's moving too fast, right?
Yeah.
All the time. It reminds me a lot of very, very early in my career, I worked in hospitality, and then it was in the nightlife scene and all that. And I had a business around that doing consultancy work anyway. And I also ran music venues for a short while as well, and was part of the music industry, I guess, for a short period. And this was in the days of MySpace, and it was when really it was the first time social media was being used as a selling tool. We would use it to book bands, but equally bands would use it to pitch themselves for bookings, and they would send in demos. And it was around the time where there was kind of half and half. You would get actually sent in the mail physical demos with a letter to ask if they could be booked, as well as digital. And it was only the first time this was happening where you were getting this digital equivalent. And it was super interesting because even then, like you'd have to imagine that I would come into work because I was the one responsible for booking the bands. And I'd come into work and every day there'd be a pile of demos on my desk, like this high. It was ridiculous sometimes, and especially over the weekends, it would really pile up. On the Monday, it would sometimes be two massive piles. And I'd have to just go through them, and you would judge the book by their cover. Literally, I'd be looking at these album covers, and I'd be like, "Well, you have to find a system." Is my point, because you don't have the time to actually look and listen to every single one. So your system starts to become more and more critical. So it starts with listening to everything, then you realize that's not doable. So then you go, okay, well, if it doesn't have artwork, say, for example, it doesn't have a sleeve, I'm not listening to it. I can't just, I have to find some criteria that shows lack of care, lack of ambition, whatever it might be. And you just doing that, and you add more and more criteria until you find your way. And what was super interesting is those, every now and then you'd get that band that would make really go the extra mile. They would get vinyl pressed, or they would send a gift, or they would do something. And like you said, really specifically, they would maybe say my name, which obviously back then was huge. They would say my name, said, hey, we know that you love these kinds of bands, and we thought maybe you'd like us. And, you previously booked X and Y, and we're good friends with theirs, or we love their stuff. And, that captures your attention. So it's interesting that, this has been around for a very long time, and it doesn't take much, but you can kind of see both sides, in the fact that the bands are just trying to get a gig and they've got hundreds of venues to send it to. And that those that are doing the booking have got an enormous amount of work to do and don't have the time to go through it. So, and like Angels, I still wanted bands, we still want deal flow, but you have to have a way of filtering, right? Is the point.
And I think it clearly isn't the only way. If you look at the VC world rather than the angel world for a moment, most of the investments that they make come from personal recommendations. Other people that they know who are also in the VC world who say, do you want to share investment with this great idea? Or they've got scouts out there looking for people that are feeding them stuff in. So I think you need to, as a founder, not rely on this kind of one-trick pony idea that sort of says, if I want to, and this is I think another problem with it, in that finding investment for your idea as a new founder is often towards the end of your development process. You put all your energy into building the idea, the bit of software, the prototype, whatever, without giving a great deal of thought as to what actually people will invest in. And when you've kind of built it, you say, now I need to find somebody to invest in it, rather than sort of trying to find people that are in the sector and asking them, what do you think the biggest problems are in this sector? What do you think people need or would you invest in, to get this problem solved? I'd really welcome your insight, your experience and so on, so that I can shape a bit, of what I'm trying to develop here. So, they come to the end of this kind of development process, and then they think, I need investment. And then they think, well, the way that I get investment is, find a mailing list of 1,000 investing founders, and then just cold outreach to all these people on this list, and often the lists are duff, there are people on them that invested 10 years ago and haven't invested since, or have died, and I absolutely appreciate why people do it. I just think it needs, if you're going to do it, it needs to be part of a much broader strategy of how you're going to find people.
Yeah, much in the same way that in traditional sales, and your outreach strategy should have cold email as part of your strategy, but it shouldn't be your strategy, right? In that same way. Yeah, absolutely. So what is and I have a feeling I already know the answer to this, but I'm because I think we share this opinion. But what would you say is one of the strongest ways to start building a network of investors, potential investors, ahead of investment, or during the fundraising process?
Yeah, I think it's worth asking, or it's worth seeking out people that have invested in similar kinds of businesses in your sector. It's worth seeking out exited entrepreneurs that have, some of whom have so much money they don't know what to do with it. So,
right. Mm-hmm.
And I've been a member of a number of angel groups for example, a fair proportion of the membership of some angel groups are exited entrepreneurs that need help to invest, how to invest their money.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can find exited entrepreneurs in your own sector, try to approach them, try to engage them, and say, you're building version 2 of the kind of problem that that they already know a bit about. Would you, or could you have a conversation with them to explore that further? And begin with this kind of rapport building approach and relationship building approach. I think another idea is to try to get people on your mailing list for, say, monthly updates of how your business is going. So you might approach people who might say, I'm not actually interested at the moment. And as part of that first approach, you might send them your most recent monthly shareholder report, even though they're not shareholders, but then say to them, well, I'd love to add you to my shareholder mailing list so that you can keep track of what it is we're doing, what it is we're building, what our progress is towards, product market fit, how many new accounts we've opened, how many new signups, all of your kind of metrics. So,
hey everyone, sorry to interrupt the episode, but really quick announcement to make. If you're a startup founder, you'll definitely want to hear this. So I want to quickly shout out our sponsor for today's episode, Founder Catalyst. Founder Catalyst have been nailing it with their SEIS and EIS advanced assurance applications, boasting a perfect 100% success rate record over the last 3 years. And if you're using their funding round service, they include that for you as standard. Speaking of their funding round service, it's incredibly cost effective. It's a fixed fee of £1,495 plus VAT. They handle all your funding round legals, regardless of how much you're raising. No monthly fees, no hidden extras. One of their customers recently raised 2.7 million and saved around £10,000 compared to the next best options. Founder Catalyst is run by founders who've been through it all, so they truly understand what you need, and we're really proud to have them sponsor this episode. So if you're looking to streamline your fundraising process and save quite a bit of cash, check out Founder Catalyst in the link in the description, where also you, as a Founders Unplugged viewer, will be privy to 10% off that fee that we talked about. So make sure you use that link in the description to get that applied. Thanks very much. Back to the episode.
And not try and do it all in one go. I think there is a real key thing here called patience. And part of the problem that many founders have is an impatience to get the money in,
which ironically makes the whole process take longer.
Yes, yeah. I mean, and it does. But I suppose in short, I could say there it is. If you want to do it well, spend a bit of time doing it well. And I think there are some people have often quite irrational fears. I have to get this out there early because somebody else is going to develop this idea, and if I'm a month late, I'll have lost the opportunity. But I don't see that happening too often.
I think there's very few cases where I think that legitimately applies. Yeah, for sure. I think the most of the time, at least in my experience, investing and both working with founders like you, it seems to be the fear, the time, sort of the ticking time element of it, mostly comes down to runway, mostly comes down to, being able to put food on the table, those sort of things. Like that, you ordinarily, or it's, they are incredibly frustrated in their full-time job and they love this and they're just like, I want to get out as quickly as possible, or somewhere in between.
Yeah, no, I can absolutely see that. And I was having this conversation with someone the other day in that there are, it's unfortunate, but, there are some founders that come from privileged backgrounds for whom survival is not an issue.
Yeah.
They've got money in the bank, they've had really good jobs, they've saved up, I don't know, a couple of 100,000 or so to, pump prime launching their business. They can pay one or two other advisors or co-founders, and And then at the other end of the spectrum, there's people that come with no real backing at all, not been to university, not got a master's or a degree, not been to Harvard and whatever, they're just ordinary Joes, if you like, but, are not going to get very far unless somebody gives them 50K or 100K, and they really struggle. And they're still living at home with their mum and dad, and they're 35, and they kind of think, well, I can't get out of this.
Yeah, I do a bit of pro bono work for founders in those kinds of situations, because I do think it's not exactly a level playing field, but we're all dealt different hands, and there's that's the way the world works at the end of the day. But yeah, I think individuals like you and I can try and do whatever we can if we can to try and help level that playing field, wherever possible. But yeah, it's difficult. I noticed you didn't mention much about sort of networking events and so on. Are you much of a fan of that? Do you think it's important for founders to get out there and not only meet other founders, but obviously then maybe even be able to start doing what you were saying? Because I really like what you're saying, by the way, about this idea of early warming up, essentially, of investors and bringing them onto like an emailing list and stuff. I advise that all the time. So yeah, what do you make of that?
I think my sense is, from my own experience and talking to many others, is that finding the right networking events to go to is a real challenge, and that it's easier in London or really big cities. If you live in an ordinary sized town or a rural community or whatever, and you've got an idea, it's very difficult to find the right networking events to go to. And a lot of networking events that I've been to in the past, networking events for, I suppose, reasonably well established small businesses, where a lot of the people are there trying to find customers to sell services to.
Right.
So there'll be, wealth advisors or accountants or solicitors or people turning up because they think, well, I need to network with more potential customers, so I can
a lot of operators,
sell them a will writing service or something. That's not to say that if you go along with the right story, you won't find people that are potentially interested in investing in the novelty of what you bring to a fairly established networking. But a lot of people tell me that they find it fairly time wasting if you can't find the right kind of events. If you can find, and they do exist, and one or two exist online as well as, as well as in some of, in London and so on. There are founder support groups, and I think they provide a certain value. Whether founders, some founders will share some information about investors with you. If they found people that invest but are not quite right for them, they might pass them over to someone else. There is this, I guess, reservation about, founders asking investors to recommend them to other investors when you don't know them very well. This like social capital thing, that sort of says, why would I recommend you to someone else when I'm not investing and I don't know you very well anyway?
Yeah.
Not going to do me any favors if you're in that 80% of group of people that fail. So I tend to suggest to founders that they either approach angel groups, that doesn't destroy my social capital at all, or they ask people like me not to make recommendations or introductions to them, but to suggest people that they could talk to. And so they make their own introduction, but I might give them one or two names of people that they might talk to.
So the devil's in the detail is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Maybe in terms of how you go about asking that question, as opposed to saying, look, I know you're not investing, but do you know anyone else that would invest? Instead of that, more like, do you know anyone in your network that could provide some advice on this topic or has experience here, something more along those lines, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah, and I hear what you're saying as well about the networking side of things. I think it is definitely a bit of a rabbit hole that some founders do struggle with, especially outside of London. You make a very valid point there. I think I'm quite fortunate in this part of the world where we've got Brighton just down the road and quite a big tech community there. That's quite good, and then London's not too far as well. But for anyone else further afield, it's not ideal. I'm part of the Rare Founder events community. You familiar with those guys in London?
I don't know them, no.
Yeah, really great. They're relatively new on the scene, but sort of taking it by storm. I did a massive demo day earlier this year, and doing another one in October. And I was very humbled to be invited to be a part of that, and I occasionally volunteer and stuff like that to help them out because of the approach is just very unique. And I think it's really focusing on of value, first and foremost. So making sure there are a significant amount of investors in the room, and sort of being very careful of the sort of ratios of service providers, founders, investors, and so on. But more than that, just has a really good approach on the sort of the philosophy of it, which is that it should be fun. And that there should be something at the very least. If you walk away from it going, that was a good night, like that's better than nothing. So I've got a lot of love for those guys. They do a really great job, and the demo day was fantastic. And a lot of founders walked away from that saying they met some very valuable connections, either in other founders or potential investors and so on. So it's interesting as well, because I notice what you mentioned about the mistake, the mistakes that a lot of people make with cold outreach. A lot of people make those mistakes in person too. As a relatively green angel, but an angel nonetheless. I find a lot of people approach me when I decide to wear the angel. On the days that I decide to wear the thing that outs me as an angel at these events, that a lot of people are doing exactly the same thing. They're going straight up and going, and then they're pitching, immediately pitching, and immediately that gets my back up a little bit, like as it would. There's not usually much of a hello, how are you, how was your day? It's just that, and I quite often use that as a teaching mechanism when it comes to outreach, to say you wouldn't walk up to someone and just go straight for the kill in person. So why would you do it in someone's inbox?
Yeah, and I think it's if you want to establish a relationship with somebody, the easiest, or one of the easiest ways is, in this kind of networking environment, is to ask them to talk about themselves rather than begin by trying to tell them about you, because most people are more than happy to, start talking about themselves and tell them what they do. And then if you would say, well, I'm an angel, whatever, and then I could then say, and what kinds of things are you interested in? What's in your portfolio? What's your thesis? Whatever. And then you can kind of get round to the point of saying, well, Greg, at this moment in time, I'm looking for something,
You usually get asked at that point. I mean, if someone's come up to me and they're like, tell me about you, and they're being very, very generous with their questions and seem genuinely curious about me and what I do and all that, at some point, I'm inevitably going to go, look, enough about me. I'm feeling a bit self-conscious now. What about you? Like, it's part of, human interaction to
it comes down to some basic social skills, really,
right?
It comes down to some kind of empathy, really, which is sadly lacking
sometimes. I think a lot of it is nerves as well, right? You've got these like you said, all of the situations that you can imagine going on. There's and a lot of founders, they might be really desperate, they might be really passionate, they've been told a lot of mixed messages, like going back to trying to I don't know, like, help with the minefield of information and misinformation that's out there. And so by the time you go to one of these things as a founder, your brain's all over the place. So, I don't blame people for being a bit nervous and maybe not being the most socially functional creatures. And let's face it as well, like a lot of us founders and angels, especially in tech, we're not always the most social. Luckily, I was... Like I said, I cut my teeth in the hospitality world, so I think that taught me a lot of good social skills. But aside from that, I probably would have been pretty awful. So benefit of the doubt. But yeah, you're right. It is tough, and you have to try and give people the benefit of the doubt, I guess. But like you said, it goes back to that. Everyone's looking for an excuse to say no at the end of the day. In the same way that my analogy with looking at those CDs that I would be sent in the mail, like I'm looking for excuses to say no because I want to whittle it down to the 5 that I need. and in the same way, I
Yes.
do the same thing with pitch decks.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if the analogy you use also holds up in the kind of scenario that I'm about to unpick, which is I and I think most investors are looking for future leaders, future CEOs. There's no point me investing in you at the moment because you've got a good idea and I think you're quite likable, at the moment now, in this kind of. I need to be able to see you manage an organisation that's, got £50 million annual revenue, employs 100 people, works on 3 continents, can execute, have managed to begin to put a team around you.
If you are enjoying this episode and want to support the show, please subscribe with notifications turned on, and let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. This lets YouTube know we are doing something right. Back to the show.
That are inspired by you and your mission, your vision, and so on. And yeah, it's very early days, obviously, but you're going to have a lot more chance of success if I can begin to see that potential in you. Because, in that record analogy, are you looking for the next, U2 or REM or,
You're right. That's where the analogy falls apart. I'm just looking for someone to book the gig, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
If I was like a talent scout for a record label,
Yeah.
I think that's where it'd be more probably the closest analogy there to what you're mentioning. Yeah, and it's interesting you're saying about the potential, right? Because it's not always like, you're not expecting that person to necessarily have all of the tools right now, but at least the basic qualities that show that they can get there.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So let's pick that apart a bit more, because that's always a really interesting topic for me at least, and I think for my audience too. And you touched on them slightly earlier as well. What would you say are some of those main qualities? But more importantly, how do you really find them in the interactions that you have with founders? Because they can be quite formulaic, those interactions, or quite structured in a way. So what do you do to try and pick those out and identify them?
I mean, that's tough, and you are, it always strikes me as, there's a certain irony around this in that in the corporate world, if you apply for any kind of, middle management job or above, somebody will put a psychometric test in front of you. And want to work out where you are in a kind of Myers-Briggs or, some other kind of tool, an Enneagram or something, that they think is going to give them some insight into, what kind of a personality you are, what kind of person you are. Whereas if you pitch for investment, you can go along and ask for 250, $500,000, $1 million. And nobody subjects you to any kind of detailed analysis of, what kind of traits you've got or skills or whatever, and it comes down to first impressions. Do you tell a good story? What's your idea, etc. And part of the irony is, I think, particularly when you talk to VCs, is they say, "Oh, it's people first. We always make decisions about people." The idea won't be the same idea. If after we've invested, the idea won't be the same idea 3 years down the line, they'll have pivoted a couple of times and, we'll actually be investing in something quite different. But it's the people that really matter. And you think, well, how do you get to that, without any of these tools and so on. And I think it's, I think part of it is from repeated exposure, from talking to people, meet them 3 times, listen, a lot of listening, have some key questions that you're looking for, so the pitch and all of that is the bit that gets you to the first meeting, the first proper meeting or the next meeting or whatever. But that's, for me, I think, when it gets interesting, that when you have some one-to-one time with somebody, you have some opportunity to unpick a lot more about, who they are, what makes them tick. And, there are things that you might be looking at, origin story, their motivation, what's making them do this, why they believe they're the right person to be doing this, whatever it is, and their vision, how big they think this can be, and have they pulled together enough proof points to convince me that it could be this big. How have they gone about doing that? And you might explore a bit about what they've done in their past life. What other examples of successes they've achieved. It doesn't surprise me, I suppose, but sometimes when you read little biographies of some of the the big successful entrepreneurs that have founded Google or Amazon or Facebook or Meta or whoever, invariably they say they got onto an entrepreneurial journey early. As children, they had, they were the ones that were going to a shop and buying stuff and bringing it back to school and selling it at a profit, or they built their own lemonade stall or whatever. There is that kind of early trait in not everybody, but a fair proportion of people, I would say. So, and then I think you're looking for me anyway. I think it's kind of fruitless to have this great big long list of attributes that you're trying to tick off, because it implies you're looking for a superhuman person that doesn't exist, because they can do all of these things. But I think there's about 4 things I think that are probably key for me, and they are belief in themselves. Whatever you throw at them, they will not be diminished by. They just believe in themselves, really, and their ability to do something. Courage, or what I sometimes read or hear being called the warrior mindset. They're just willing to fight. They want to prove something to people, and often the thing that drives them forward is that need to prove something that somebody told them they can't do. It's like a battle. I suppose what I call spirit, being spirited, being the kind of person that attracts people to them,
Right.
because they are they have an energy, that they have a spirit about trying to do something.
They can rally people behind them.
And then I suppose there's the kind of universal grit, resilience kind of thing. That they will always get up again. It doesn't matter how many times you knock them down; they will get up again. And how they demonstrate those things is always interesting to explore when you have a bit of time to spend with somebody.
Interesting. How important to you is team when evaluating a potential opportunity too, and likewise when advising startups to kind of prepare for investment?
It is important, and I think the difficulty founders face a lot of the time is recruiting a good team of I suppose at an early stage they're a team of people that you would probably call co-founders rather than people that work for them, because they haven't got any money. So you're trying to recruit people on the basis of this will be really big. All I can offer you at this time is an opportunity to be part of something big, and there's some sweat equity for you, and if we build it together, then we'll all have a share of something that's really big. So finding a team of people that buy into you and buy into that message is a real challenge. But if you are able to pull that off, then I think that speaks a lot for you and the qualities and attributes that you've got. Some of the difficulties that I think founders face is that they go to their mates that they went to school with or they went to university with, who they want to be part of their team, often more because they're mates rather than because they've got any special set of skills or something to contribute. So kind of, working that out in terms of what are these other people's contributions is really key. And and I think if you go to I think I was reading something by Brian Chesney about Airbnb. There are three of them, and they've known each other for forever, and they just happen to be also great members of a team, and they were lucky in that respect. They all could make a great contribution, and it's going to be really difficult at the beginning when you come with your kind of disruptive, game-changing idea that whatever, to recruit people into it. It's going to be difficult to get the absolute best people that are already a success in the world in their own field, because they've got more to give up. But it's, I guess, part of what you're making a judgment about.
And
where have they found these people, and have they got the potential as well as the founder themselves?
Right. And I guess that speaks to that spirit that you mentioned, right? Which is if a founder has been successful in finding these individuals, like you say, and convincing them to join, and like you said, especially for equity and no money at that point, that speaks to that quality quite highly, doesn't it? That they were able to assemble a team around and rally these people around their vision. It bodes well for the future of the business that they're able to sell the vision like that, right? Yeah. It's a very good indication of a leadership quality there.
Yeah.
To your point of the potential as to what they can do later on. Yeah. We've got similar ideas there, which is interesting. Well, look, we are entering into the end of part one, and I mentioned this as probably a bit of a surprise to you, but the way that these are going to be released now for this season is that we're going to be releasing them in two parts. So first hour and then second hour. So that's that kind of end of part one. And I want to switch gears a little bit, if that's okay.
Thank you for listening and or watching. Subscribe with notifications turned on to get notified when part 2 comes out. While you wait, please join in the conversation in the comments below.